The Seekonk River is not really a river. It is a relatively narrow brackish tidal basin that is the northernmost extension of the Narragansett Bay. Completely surrounded by East Providence, Pawtucket, and Providence, it stretches about 4 miles from where the last of the Blackstone Cataracts, the Pawtucket Cataract that spawned the American Revolution, falls into the sea, until it joins the Great Salt River, the Providence River, as it flows between Bold Point and Fox Point, just south of the hurricane barrier. Despite its urban location and the waves of industrialization that have crested upon its shorelines, it is a vibrant ecological hotspot. It is in fact, home to what is probably the longest stretch of Rhode Island where the forest truly meets the sea, as well as fish and birds in vast profusion. The improvements in the ecosystem are due to the receding of an industrial wave, as well as the environmental laws of the late 20th century. And now, as the next wave of the development has started, it is time to preserve as much as possible of its ecological richness, as with climate change, we may not get another chance for hundreds of years. The Seekonk River gets its name from the Seekonk Wampanoag people whose ancestors moved in when the last glaciers receded and who are still present in the community. One of a number of closely related tribes in southern New England, including the Narragansett, Niantic, and Pokanoket, who shared family ties as well as similar cultures and technologies. They were the sole inhabitants until the Europeans so rudely and violently displaced them in the 1600s, pushing them to the margins. The Seekonk Basin provided a rich living for its first inhabitants. Seasonal villages at Pawtucket and at the mouth of the 10-mile river had fish weirs that provided an abundance of fish and shellfish, an abundance still seen at these spots today. Agriculture was practiced on the Seekonk Plain to the east, and well-managed forests provided an abundance of resources as well. Moving south from Pawtucket, the Seekonk Basin has steep bluffs surrounding it, and it is tightly contained by walls, even though here vegetation is found away and fishing birds are to be found. The river is crossed by 2 bridges just before it widens, down around the public fishing area and the state pier. The Tidewater site formerly was a part of the fossil fuel economy and has a toxic legacy. It is being cleaned up as part of its resurrection in the service economy. A coastal greenway is part of the plan. The east side of the basin is still industrialized, with factories and facilities from various waves of development jumbled together. But even in the most industrialized areas, there is almost always a ribbon of forest along the water, providing for somewhat cleaner water and providing cover for the wild things that make their homes there. Much of the shoreline is walled, with the oldest example that I know of the wooden coffer dam that we used to fill the salt marsh at what was once Washburn Wire, building out the land so that ships could dock in the deeper water and have flat land to build upon. Later developments used stone, concrete, and metal to fulfill the same purposes. The west side of the basin is among the ecological wonders of Rhode Island. For 2 miles, from Morley Field in Pawtucket to the Henderson Bridge, nearly the entire shoreline is lined with forests that touch the sea. In some places, the steep coastal bluff borders directly on the salt marshes. In other places, stone walls line the shore, and for a stretch, a riprap shoreline has a road along it before it meets the forests on the bluff. But the view from the water is of continuous forest, and the fish and wildlife are abundant. The forest is not very wide, rarely going past the coastal bluff, but in many places it has more old trees than any other forests in the state. While there are a variety of parks along the water, very little of the forest is permanently protected, even if the coastal bluff is steep enough to restrict development and state law protects coastal bluffs. Much of the continuous forest along the western shore is in cemeteries that allow access only during the daytime And what may be the wildest stretch, even without a path along the water, belongs to a hospital that does not want people accessing its forest. It is in this area, and another in Pawtucket, that the forest has a completely natural border on the sea, grading from forest to salt marsh with no walls intervening. In addition to the flow of fresh water from the Blackstone, the Seekonk Basin receives fresh water from at least 3 other tributaries. One is a small stream that flows mostly underground from the area of McCoy Stadium, entering the basin in southern Pawtucket. Another small stream starts along the western edge of Butler Hospital and enters the Seekonk at a marsh and delta at the very northern edge of Blackstone Park. The marsh is a very rich place, with many birds using it as a hunting ground. The largest tributary is the 10-Mile River, which enters the Seekonk by flowing over the Omega Dam in East Providence. And even with all of the ills of industrialism that the 10-Mile River has endured, it is still a most bountiful place. For years, friends of the 10-Mile River dipped nets into the water in the spring and lifted herring over the dam into Omega Pond so they could spawn. This kept the herring runs alive until the recent fish ladder meant that hand-carrying fish over the dam was no longer necessary. Other fish ladders have been built along the 10 Mile in recent years, opening herring spawning habitat well inland. Below the Henderson Bridge, much of the land was originally marsh that was diked and filled, providing land for industrial and transport facilities. What is now India Point and Gano Street parks were a series of docks, the old wooden framework still visible in places, while the other side of the river still contains boating facilities and the remnants of 2 old railroad bridges stand as silent reminders. But even here, amidst the hustle and bustle of the cities, wildlife thrives and fish populations flourish. The Seekonk Basin is a unique place. It is a mixture of old industry, new development, parks, ribbons of forest, amazing wildlife, and some of the oldest wild trees in Rhode Island. Surrounded by cities, it is a recreational paradise, though not nearly meeting its potential due to limited access. But its future is in doubt. The new wave of development, combined with the rolling climate catastrophe and rising seas, threaten it all. The shape of the bowl and its hardened shorelines means that most of the marshes that still exist will not be able to migrate further inland. The parks behind hardened shorelines are also at risk, as the only place with a wall high enough to stand 100 years of sea level rise is the Buckland Point Sewage Treatment Facility. The forests protect the water quality and provide leaves to feed the detritus feeders in the water. The detritus feeders in the plankton feed the fish, which feed the osprey, who then fertilize the forest. It is a system, a whole place that needs all of its parts to flourish. And the water will not flourish without the forest, and the forest will not flourish without the fish. So it is time to act, to channel development where it will do the least harm and the most good, to protect the forests, to make sure the marshes, so important to the fish and birds, have room to retreat, to make sure access is increased and the parks enhanced. It is not simple work. It will take thought, collaboration, and some real muscle power. If we do not take advantage of the current opportunities, much will be lost. It may be hundreds of years before we get another chance. Where the forest meets the sea is an important place in Rhode Island. It's important if we want Rhode Island to be better for everyone, for all of its inhabitants. If we want the herons to feed and the eagles to soar, as well as human communities to thrive, let us not squander the opportunity.